Welcome people to Property Careers Prospector School online. We are now 5 sessions deep in the second series. Today, the subject matter is probably, as it relates to prospecting, by far and away the most important one that you're ever likely to hear inside the prospecting space, and that is the question of presence. And presence is something that's relatively new. I mean, obviously not new in the face of what you might see out there in the marketplace in years go by. I mean, it's way more fascinating than it was. I mean, most people, when they think of the prospecting equation, they look at it purely in the context of, hang on, what have I got here? Purely in the context of hand-to-hand combat. Like, you've got to speak to a lot of people. I know that, when you have conversations probably with your sales team leader or other advisors, they're always saying it's a numbers game and you jump onto as many people as you can. Some of them even say to you that the whole idea of prospecting is to speak to as many people as you possibly can, knowing the conversions, and you're bound to actually strike people. Now, I've said this many times before. I'll say it again at the risk of sounding like an almost broken record. It's true. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're out there in a specific geographic area, whether it be knocking doors, whether it be kissing babies, whether it be driving an ice cream truck down the middle of the street and giving away free ice creams on the premise that, if somebody decides to sell at some stage, that they'll look you up and will list with you, you're going to find sellers. But please understand that this is, in the first instance, definitely not sustainable long term. And more importantly, it's an ilk, if you like, that you're going to expire. You're just going to get tired of it, mainly because the number of people that reject you as opposed to those that are positive around it is such that you're just going to tire of it. Now, I've said this before. When I look at the prospecting game, there are 4 considerations that I make dependent upon the protocols that I'm going to do. At the risk of overbearing with this, I just want to go through them quickly, mainly because most of the time I find that people ignore these. They largely ignore these 4 prospecting tests. The first is the yield. The first thing that I look at in any form of prospecting is how many connections do I have to make before I actually have a listing. The second is, what is the quality of that listing? Now, the reason I bring this particular one up in the context of talking around presence is one thing I can tell you for sure. If a prospect comes to you, if they seek you out, they are generally pre-sold on some aspect of your offering out there in the marketplace. So these are better quality listings. These are the listings that other agents covet, and they generally not only sell relatively easy, they are also ones that lead to even more listings. So going all the way back to our strategy, we said that the whole idea is to get that foothold, which we talked about last week. Once you've got that foothold, to then move into traction, turning 1 listing into 2, 2 into 4 as you grow, and then get eventually to momentum when you have retention around market share, when you have about 1/3 of that marketplace. Now, given the question, when we look at foothold, when we're looking at attacking a new market, when we're looking at breaking it, or rejuvenating a market, and we start with foothold, we're given a couple of choices. Now, the general rule of thumb is stick to about 1,000, get to know that 1,000 people over a sustained period of some sort of longevity they'll list with you. Now, to me, I reject that entire concept. because I know that if I chose to, over a period of, roughly 18 months, if I wanted to, I could probably command a very strong presence just on off my own bat of around 6 to maybe 7,000 properties. Now I know that 6 to 7,000 properties, if they're going to yield me capacity wise about 20 sales per annum, that just has to stand up and say that that's around well over 100, maybe 140, even as high as 150 sales per annum, and that is out of control. Yes, I know there's logistics nightmares, and there's only so many properties an individual can handle at any one level. But even if we said right now the way you're thinking, if over a 12-month period you wanted to look at commanding some sort of market share over an area of 5,000, then it's got to work. So to understand how you can move into this space rapidly, you have to understand how the consumer behaves, what their reactionary disposition is. And this is largely achieved by creating presence. And the beautiful thing about presence is that it doesn't attract activity or action from any customer that doesn't want it, yet it still puts you top of mind subliminally whilst they are in a state of dormancy. Just a quick reminder so that anyone that's paying attention, recognize that property owners are only ever, as far as we're concerned, in one of two states. They're either active, where they are researching the market ahead of selling now or imminently, or they're dormant. Now, I don't know if I've actually articulated this, but I'll say it again. In the perspective of real estate perspective, they're active or dormant. The problem is, in terms of real estate services, even when they're in dormancy, they are always interested in the state of the market at any one time. I dare say that any of you that proffer to friends, relatives at social functions, if you meet a complete stranger and they say, "What do you do for a living?" You say you're in real estate. I dare say they throw those immediate two questions at you. The first being, how's the market? And they generally want to know. So property owners in dormancy, the same as those that are active, are wanting to know what the state of the market is. Of course, those that are active are out there finding out for themselves, and it's easier to pique their interest. The second question is, what's my property worth? So they're always interested. Now, if your method of prospecting is to go out there and do one-on-one combat, is to actually proffer out leaflets or put things in letterboxes or door knock or telephone prospect and offer what they refer to as a free market appraisal, you're going to get activity around that because the dormants can't help themselves. In fact, one of the first things the dormant will say is, does that cost anything or is it free? Now, if you're offering free market appraisals, which is a nonsense, I'm yet to know of any real estate agent in the capacity of a real estate agent that charges for valuations. It's valuers that charge for valuations. What we give freely is opinions, and opinions are generally free. And like for a long time, this made sense. It was a good idea. I'm not saying I was never part of that. Of course, it made perfect sense in the early days to offer something of value to the property owners, or hopefully to property sellers, have them come and then want that information. And then invariably you might find out that their plans are to make a move, and that would make some sense. But this is quite limiting, very limiting, in the sense that because you're getting a lot of people that are dormant property owners, they have no interest in making a move, they've no plans to do so, that they are definitely going to invariably be interested in the information, but not necessarily selling. So you're going to be seeing a lot of people that have asked you out for a market appraisal, but there's no fire. Do not, please write this down, do not shovel coal into a hole where there's no fire. Now, the thing I like about presence, the thing I like about having a conscious a consciousness that leads you to creating presence in a marketplace, is that presence is fairly benign around dormant property owners. You can advertise presence, but make that presence independent of response. In other words, people asking for market appraisals, yet it can still have the same net effect of presence working its magic, so that if they do at any stage become active, then they're going to put you on the shopping list. So here's where what I teach real estate agents and what traditional trainers might teach, this is where we part company permanently. I get it that, you still get the odd occasional listing if you're out there doing hand-to-hand combat. And yes, for some people, the idea of offering a free market appraisal can cause the meeting, and then you can run trails for months, if not years, before they eventually are selling. And if you've established or built a relationship, that can lead to a result. But to my mind, that doesn't make sense either. You see, if you've been working on a client that you met in 2015 and you've been running these trails and all that sort of stuff, yet I've been working on presence, and I'm now at a stage where I'm a player in the marketplace and I have significant presence, and you don't have much presence and you're doing lower numbers, and that relationship has caused them to consider you, but then they bring me in and I can talk about the volume of sales that I've done in the area, and the presence is glaringly obvious to you. And as long as when I open my mouth up from a professional capacity, I use the right words, I'm going to win the business. So here's what I want to say to you. Don't worry about the business that you are hoping to do in 2024. Worry about the business that you can get now in 2021 that you can immediately leverage off via your presence and everything else that you've got to get traction, to get market share, and then that presence is self-perpetuating. So if you're writing notes, the thing I want you to understand is that presence is the priority all the time in the capacity of prospecting. Because if you have presence in the marketplace, you are an automatic consideration. If you're an automatic consideration, then you have the chance to take and maintain market share. Now, to understand how to manufacture presence effectively, one has to understand marketing. And quite often when I'm talking to people about marketing, what about building relationships? I've just got a question that's come in. Well, here's what I have to say about relationships. And I think I kind of mentioned this last week. Relationships are important, but I can tell you now, they are easily eroded in the capacity of real estate, particularly if the relationship you are seeking to have and maintain with property sellers is the right one. And this is an important thing that all of us have to understand. Too many agents over the years have purported to have a relationship that is a personal relationship with their sellers. Now, I think that is just a complete nut of nonsense. In fact, I can tell you that most of the problems that stem around discounting and that are problematic with what agents charge are born out of the fact that agents go to the public on the pretense of having a personal relationship with their customers. Now, I believe the relationship needs to be, and I want to give definition to this, personal bull, but I also am very clear with all of my clients that the relationship is fundamentally commercial and that they should judge my relationship with them on the value that I deliver in exchange for the money they give me around that commercial relationship. All right, hope that answers that question. Let's get back to this concept, because I've never, ever, I've lost count. I've got to actually expand on this. I've lost count in the number of people that I've done business with that I haven't necessarily liked. And I can tell that they didn't go much on me either. But because I delivered a superior product, because it had a proven track record, and because on the subject matter we're talking about here, that I had inarguable presence in that marketplace, I was an automatic consideration. And after a period of time, the question of fee and what I was charging never came up. And it's because I was quick to establish that the relationship was fundamentally commercial, that I did this for money, and people understood that. All right, let's get back to this presence question, because it's one that I see a lot of people like yourselves, they worry about it, especially when they're starting out. So they start out and I'll ask them to put certain promotional material into the marketplace, not least of which is the for sale card, which is basically a postcard size replica of the for sale side inside of the company. And the first thing they'll say to me, but it doesn't have my name on it. It doesn't have my mobile phone number on it. How can that be powerful? And I go, but that's precisely what does make it powerful. You see, what we're trying to establish with the people in the area is that we are prevalent as an individual company. We are prevalent and we are top of the mind, so that if I do approach somebody, and it might be in an entirely different capacity. You see, I know that property sellers go to open homes. So if they're frequenting open homes and they're imminently thinking of selling, and they suddenly walk into one of mine, and there has been significant presence marketing in the area, when they make contact with me, when they're looking at the property, and when I move into a qualification technique, for example, many of you see me do this, to follow up on that open for inspection. So when I call them on the Monday, not on the same day, to my mind, that is way too soon. I call them on the Monday, purely in my mind, I'm looking for sellers. The conversation goes like this. They answer the phone. I say, sorry to bother you. This is Mark from Catch and Kill Your Own Real Estate. You came to an open for inspection of ours on the weekend at number 45 Lambert Street. I'll then say, now I won't ask you about this one, because if you liked it, you would have told us on the weekend. They always respond yeah to that. Now, so my understanding is that you were selling, weren't you? Now, because of the presence, because of me running the assumptive close, they might think I've told them, and they just go, yeah, and I'm on the way. So recognize that this close over here is strongly related to the presence that's back there. Everything kind of looks the same, and off we go. I'll give you another quick example before I delve into the reality of presence. When I do locate a seller, one of my favorite questions in setting up, which we'll talk about later in the series, is I'll say, they say they're selling. So let's say they've called the agency off, for argument's sake, LA Woman, which is our just listed that's put out there. And they'll be calling up and they'll say, you've got a property for sale. Where is it? For reasons I'll explain later on. I just automatically say to them, oh, hi, good afternoon, Mark Dwyer speaking. Joan, is it? Joan says yes. And I say, hi, Joan, I could call you Joan? Yes, I can. Now, I understand you're selling 16 Drover Street. So that's an assumptive. She goes, yes. That tells me automatically that she's selling. Perfect. Then I move in. So the very next question is, who referred you to us, Joan? She says, well, no one. I then move into, was it all our signs that you saw? She might still say no, to which I would then say, you got here all by yourself. Aren't you clever? That inference is suggestive of presence. And if I have that presence, I've just calmed her down by saying, most people come to us by way of referral, or they come to us because we are prolific in the area and we have presence. Now, if we don't have that, that just looks like one big con. But if it's the truth and I've said it and it creates positive reinforcement, can you see how the work on presence leads to an automatic result and an assumption that we're the only agency to go with. So all of the benefits that sit around presence are just completely undoubted, and this is why it's so important. So to understand how we get presence on a grand scale in a short period of time, we need to understand the power of marketing. What is marketing in a single word? Well, it's not advertising. This is one of the most common misconceptions around the real estate business. We think that marketing is getting the word out. Sure, in manufacturing presence, we want to get the word out. We want to get it, so we use advertising to do that. But advertising is merely a conduit. It is not marketing itself. I hope you're writing this down, and I hope this penetrates. Marketing is the ability, what marketing is about, it is about creating perceptions. So marketing is creating the perception that eventually you hope becomes the reality. If we're looking at the difference between marketing and advertising, the difference between the two is fairly simplistic. Advertising is merely the conduit by which you send the message down that conduit. So one of the conduits would be, if we're talking about print advertising, would be a page in a newspaper. That is an advertising conduit. Or if you're advertising something online, or if you're putting a leaflet out that says, we've just recently listed a property nearby, I wanted you to be the first to know. Or if you're got it open for inspection and you're sending an invitation out, that is advertising. That is the conduit. Marketing, however, is the message that's contained within that conduit. So for example, with marketing, so we want to create a perception. So if we have the PMBX, which some of you may or may not be aware, this is a just listed card that you distribute around competitor listings when they come up. Again, I'll talk about this later in the series, but when a competitor lists a property, within a definitive radius around that, there are sellers that are automatically watching that listing. So if you distribute around that competitor's listing a notice that says, we have buyers, particularly if you say we have buyers that are looking in the street where my property is located. Now, if I'm a seller, that's a good ad. That perception that you've created is that you have buyers. It's an assumption that I have as a seller. I've decided to sell. That piques my interest because immediately I'm thinking, well, who have you got and how much would they pay? So that causes me to call. So the advertising conduit is the leaflet. The marketing is the message that creates that perception. My perception is you've got buyers. I go ahead and call. Why is this so important to understand? Well, some of you are already embarked on this. If not, at some stage you will. Or some of you have been doing it for some time, where I'll say to you, the number one, the key, irrespective of what any agent says, what any trainer says, what any advice you may have heard in the past, the number one draw card to property sellers still to this very day is geographic signage in the area. If you've got signed presence in any marketplace, you will always fall onto the shopping list. Even if you failed to get the data into a database of someone that you met in 2017 and send them goodies and birthday cards and Christmas cards and newsletters and all that sort of stuff, even if you failed to do that, if that dormant property owner becomes active, even though you contacted them years ago and you failed to do it, by virtue of the fact that you have strong presence in the area, that you have signage presence in the area, you are going to fall onto that shopping list. So it falls to you to make that the key priority, which is why you'll see in most of the advertising, most of the leaflets, most of the marketing promos that we do inside a property marketer, is particularly around something we call the regen, which we'll be showing you, the regenerative prospecting process. You'll notice that the number one feature on all of them is the sign card, for everything from the for sale card itself to the rear end of LA Woman, which is the just listed for our listings, PMBX, which is the just listed for competitor listings, it has a feature in the signboard. So we're constantly pushing the signboard out there because we know that if they have sign recollection and they become active, you'll automatically fall onto that shopping list. So there's going to be lots of things where you feel like it's not really doing anything. The reason that I'm bringing this up is in presence marketing, you're marketing a perception. You are not marketing a call and respond promo. So when we're doing any form of presence marketing, when it comes to advertising, there are distinct no-nos that I tell you to stay away from. Number one, atop of that list is no call to action. What do I mean by that? That you don't want to have a specific call to action, not necessarily in every instance, but the primary consideration needs to be presence. So we don't want to have a call to action to anyone other than a seller. So we want it to be baited to sellers, but we don't want that bait to appeal to dormant property owners. So the last thing you'll find on any of the marketing that I suggest that you use around prospecting are the words free market appraisal, which in my mind, to my mind, is a nonsense anyway. I've always maintained that I'm a marketer. It's not my job to calculate or analyze value. I'm a marketer. It's my job to create value and to leverage that. And in the first instance, I just want identification. So that's the first rule. The second rule is minimal amount of words. Please understand this. In most forms of marketing, people don't read, and nothing's going to change around that statistic. 1 in 10 people are avid readers. So anything that's too heavy in dialogue is just going to look too hard to anyone that's looking at it. Now, think about this. When you were kids and you go all the way back to the schoolyard, what were the most popular books when you went into the library? We're going to hazard a guess and say the picture books. Yes? Well, it's true even now. Those little kids grew up. So as practically as you can, say what you've got to say with pictures, and limit wherever you can the amount of text on any form of marketing to no more than 20 words. And fill it up with images, say it with text. This is where we say, just fundamentally, less is more. The less said, the more powerful it is. So then I hope that you understand in the early stages of the foothold, when we say put those sign cards out. So if you look at the for sale card, in manufacturing presence, as I said to you on the last installment, this is the basis by which we build everything else around Pröspector on. So if you deliver these under the door in week 1, then into the letterbox in week 2, wait a week, now get to week 4 back in the letterbox. We've got this gap week in which we could quite possibly, after doing 2, maybe engage in PMBXs. So any competitor listings that have come up, we could put around those signs a just listed that says that we have buyers for those properties. Now you're at week 4, then you move to week 5 and week 6 is also a rest. Here you could then run what we call Fat Boy, which we'll be talking about next week. This is targeted at main arterial road properties, as I've said to you. In the manufacturer presence, those main arterial roads are key. You see, for people to get in and out of those properties that we really want to list in the quieter streets, they have to frequent the main roads. If you're writing this down, your goal should be to have 3 to 5 for sale signs, or any kind of sign, I should have said, for sale, sold, even for lease signs. Coincidentally, for many decades before I got into real estate, agents used to put on the rental properties for rent or to let, which people used to come along on the to let, putting an eye on their toilet. But they used to put for rent or to let. And I came along the scene and I rationalized, hang on, for sale has the same letters as for lease. So the reason we put the for lease up there is it looked almost like it was for sale and was mistaken for sale signs and did the job. I've even had instances where companies have removed the for sale or for lease altogether and just put a signboard up there, which still generates inquiry. Don't ever do anything that's going to slow inquiry down. Even if you've got to qualify, people are ringing the signs and they're saying, oh no, I was looking for something rent, or oh no, I was looking for something for sale, and you're getting inquiry. What's the problem with that? You want people to contact you. That's for another subject matter. That's around advertising. Again, in the context. So we have those main arterial roads. Yeah. If you've got 3 to 5 signs, it means that the people getting in and out of those places have to frequent those signs both ways. You can never, ever, ever be doing too much in the way of presence marketing. So if you've got those for sale cards, I even keep them in the car. If I happen to be out waiting to bring someone through a property that's inspect, I'll just, while I'm waiting for them, I'll just shove them into letterboxes immediately surrounding the property. We would have those for sale cards sitting inside magazines. In fact, one of the things that we did, I usually tell this to leaders, but you know, I know that there are kids that distribute local papers that they used to put on the front of lawns, and we used to get them and ask them to slide our for sale kinds into the newspapers. So if they left the paper on the front lawn in the plastic bag, whatever, they picked it up, it would drop out onto the lawn. The people would have to pick it up and then maybe throw it out. This is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to see. You see, presence is something that you can do constantly. It doesn't have direct cause and effect ramifications that are visible, and this is why people are reluctant about it. But believe you me, it has longevity. And once you have presence, to maintain it, it's relatively simple. The metaphor that I use, the message that I have for you is I understand that it is hard work to initiate presence. It's like starting a fire, trying to get that spark to take effect and get the fire started. That's hard work. That's the foothold process. But once you've got that initial spark and you've got listings, to leverage from 1 to 2 is much easier. So the fire's already started, and all we're doing is adding more fuel to that fire. Less work than foothold, still a bit of work. Once the fire is blazing and you've got listings and all you've got to do is replace them, it just becomes a job of vigilance where you keep an eye on the fire, and the moment that fire dies down, you just get up off your bottom, pick up another log, put it on a fire, and sit back down. This is the journey of presence. It's the one that I absolutely implore you to embrace, and it is achieved quite readily by embracing the strategy that we have for you in a practical sense and getting on with that foothold plan. My name is Mark Dwyer. You can reach me at mark@propertycareers.com.au. My mobile is +61 410 592 165. And I look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Property Careers Prospector School.